So did they separate the classes, the younger ones?
Ages?
Yeah, by ages or experience?
No, not by experience, and not really by ages. I mean, 4th grade and 9th graders were dancing in the same dancing school. It may have, now I may be wrong on that, it may have been the 4th, 5th grades were in one day a week, and then 6, 7,
I see.
4, 5, and 6, and then 7, 8, and 9 were in another day, but I've kind of forgotten. But.
So did he charge?
Oh yeah. I never knew how much. Parents handle that, but.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
That's the way to have it.
Right.
Yeah. So somebody told me you had to be invited. Is that true?
If I was invited, I didn't know it. I was told I was going by my parents.
Right, right.
Yeah, but I have no idea.
Well, I'm sure I heard it from somebody who wasn't invited.
Well, I don't know. I may have had a written invitation early on that as long as you behaved yourself, you were expected back the next year. I know that, unless you moved out of the area.
Right. Right. I just wondered. I mean, especially as a kid, you don't know what's going on.
Right.
Okay, so in 3rd grade, tell us that great historic event when you were in 3rd grade.
3rd grade,
I just love this.
The Hindenburg flew down the green. And I can't remember whether it was the next to last or the last voyage of the Hindenburg to the United States. And I have a feeling it was the next to last. I did hear that it made 10 crossings in its schedule prior to, or 9 crossings prior to the final one when it crashed or burned. And but it did fly down Longmeadow Street, and Miss Hicks, who was the principal of Center School, paced off as only she could pace it off as a 6-footer.
She was 6 feet tall?
She was darn close to 6 feet tall. And we all looked up to her, I'll tell you that. And she was a good basketball player too, and she played boys' rules.
Well.
And anyway, she put a stake in at the south end of the green and measured 804 feet, and that's how long the Hindenburg was, and put another stake in the ground, which was, as I remember, up somewhere near the junior high school. And from the south end of the green, that far was the length of it, and it looked like it filled the whole green when it flew overhead.
Now, were there trees the way there are now on the green?
Yes, but probably there are fewer now than there were then.
Oh, okay.
The elms were in trouble at that point, and
oh, right.
we still were losing some elms, and but it's pretty much the way it was then. There are fewer trees, fewer tall trees, but 38 Hurricane took care of a few of them too.
So I don't want to leave the Hindenburg,
right.
especially for people who don't even know what it is. But
the Hindenburg was
like how high was it?
Probably about 1,000 to 1,500 feet up.
So
because it was flying for show.
So it wanted to be low enough so you could really see it
and make a spectacular sight, which it did. And to a 3rd grader, I can still remember it vividly.
Oh, I bet anybody could. Yeah.
That saw it. It was noisy, and it was.
It was noisy?
Well, I mean, what, 6 or 8 engines on this thing that drove it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it just floated.
Oh, no, it had.
It's filled with helium.
It was filled with hydrogen.
Oh, hydrogen.
Which is why it burned. Helium is non-flammable. And
oh,
we controlled the helium supply for dirigibles in this country.
What do you mean?
Because we had the chemistry to make it.
Oh.
I mean, to take the gas and produce it.
So this was filled with hydrogen.
Hydrogen.
And then?
Which was the other lighter than air gas.
And then, how did the engines make it go?
They were hanging below, and just, how does it make an airplane go? It just...
Well, that
It
to me is a
goes.
total mystery.
Well, forget the jets.
How's the bumblebee doing? I don't know any of this.
Well, it's all the same sort of thing, but yeah, they're the motive force, and the air goes past the propellers on the engines that are hanging below the blimp, below the dirigible or blimp.
So the concept with this technology was that it was going to spread and
Yeah.
carry passengers. And,
Yeah, well, it did. I mean, they were carrying passengers back and forth,
Oh,
and it went faster than ocean liners. And it had not the carrying capacity of an ocean liner, but certainly the service was as good, or as they tried to sell, better than an ocean liner, more gracious.
more gracious.
More gracious. I mean, these were sterling silver services for the 30 or 40 passengers that were on these
Really?
things. Yes, and staterooms and everything else in the cabin part of this.
Oh, for goodness, I didn't realize
Yeah.
that. And no seasickness. Oh, I
Could have
guess
been
air
yeah, I mean,
sickness
those
could
things-
be. Yeah,
those-
right.
They could
Could be
float.
bad.
They could float pretty badly, but you get used to it as you get used to the sea eventually.
So then, very shortly thereafter.
Yeah, and it may have been a week, 2 weeks later, 2 weeks afterwards. And I have a feeling this was
That
the
it
next
blew
to
up.
last that it caught fire.
Over Lakehurst, New Jersey.
Yeah, which is where it was landing. It was coming in to be moored at Lakehurst, which was the center for the East Coast center for the dirigibles that the Navy had, our Navy had, of comparable size, of 700 and some odd feet.
The Navy had them?
Yeah,
I think I just saw something about they had one during the Civil War.
they
First one went up.
used balloons in the Civil
Oh,
War.
balloons, yes,
Yeah,
you're right.
tethered balloons. Would let them
You
go
could
up.
see
and
behind enemy lines
Yeah.
and stuff.
see over a hill.
So when the Hindenburg blew up, that was a huge deal.
Yeah,
And
that was about the demise of
the whole technology.
the whole Zeppelin thinking. And the United States Navy, I've forgotten, had four or five, I think, Zeppelins that they used. A couple of them crashed, and the rest of them they took apart.
Yeah. They retired them.
Yes.
So right around this time were those two huge weather events of 36 and 38 too, which
The
you had a
30
bird's eye view from
30
looking
30
down at the river.
Sure did. The bird's eye view of the 38 hurricane wasn't as thrilling as the spring floods, the March flood of 1936. And that was just ice back up in all of the tributary rivers that just suddenly broke loose. And it just brought a ton of ice and a ton of water that had been backed up behind them.
I was surprised we didn't have that this year because there would have
You've
been
got all
such a
flood
big.
control dams up the
Oh, now we have flood
tributary
control
rivers.
dams.
As a result of the 36 flood, the federal government decided they were going to build, Corps of Engineers was going to build dams. There's one, the Knightville Dam up near Worthington, Huntington. Between Huntington and Worthington is a flood control dam. And the dam at Littleville Reservoir, I think that made the reservoir for that branch of the Westfield River. And
But also it must have to do with like a quick spring or something like that it happened so.
this was mostly ice breakup, and it happened in the river, all the way up the river, and there was just ice all over everywhere. There was a lot of snow, and it broke up eventually, but it broke up not as the river did, for instance, this year, of slowly breaking up, starting at the south end and melting going north. This started, for some reason, breaking up in the north and huge chunks of ice were coming down, and along with roofs and trees and everything else were coming down the river.
All the debris that comes with
Yeah.
the flood.
Exactly, and it caused the Enfield Dam the Enfield Rapids were backed up, and that's what caused the flood in this part of the river, and along with high water anyway. But
Now, the Springfield, I have some pictures. I don't know if it was that flood or 38, but Main Street was all flooded.
both,
People were on rowboats
both of them.
in Main Street,
Yeah.
and so what was it like where you were on the meadows?
It flooded to the east side, the scarp at the east side of what is Interstate 91 now.
So it came up one level, like.
No, it came up to the first real scarp. In other words, if you consider the railroad tracks on the river level, and anything east of that to the first high ground that you see the scarp of, from Interstate 91, just to the east, and it's just to the east of them. The river came up to that, partway up that bank. And there was a lot of water going down the river. I remember that. I can remember seeing a couple of barn roofs going down.
You're like 7 years old?
Yeah.
You can remember all that?
6 years old.
6 years old?
Well, you don't forget it.
Yeah.
My father and I went down and we took about a 6-foot 2x4, and my father put a point on the end of it because we knew that there was going to be high water, and we went down and drove it in the ground as well as we could with a hand sledgehammer, and in the 36 flood that was carried away eventually, but we got to where we could see about 6 feet of water where we were, and couldn't get out to where we drove the stake in. That was underwater.
Oh, yeah.
That was where 6 feet of water was.
So, I mean, the ground is so sodden anyway. A lot of trees must have come down, and
Not too many along the scarp. You lost a few, but always did. But it was an interesting experience. In the '38 hurricane, there was just a ton of rain that came with that and caused high water, and the Nightville Dam hadn't been completed at that point.
which dam?
Nightville, Huntington, the one at Huntington.
Oh, Huntington.
Yeah. And so that there was no damming effect of the river at that point. And so the Westfield River sent a lot of water down, and as did the Deerfield, and because the hurricane went right up the Connecticut River.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
It didn't turn at all?
No.
Just.
It went pretty much right up the river and swung off to the east, like in White River Junction.
Yeah, so it must have lasted a long time too, as it petered out, and still raining.
It rained a lot.
Okay. Well, we've covered almost a decade.
Almost got me into junior high school.
Okay, so I think we'll continue next time. So thank you so much for being here,
You're
Brewster,
welcome.
and we're going to keep talking. And thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned.
My pleasure.